Now let's get more analysis on the outlook for Europe. Willem-Mark Nabarro is head of European equities for Asia at Exane BNP Paribas in Singapore. And I really wanted to get straight onto that meeting between Merkel and Sarkozy. Of course, it's the first time they're going to be meeting in 2012. We've seen the euro down this year so far. We've got borrowing costs on the rise once again. And what do you think, therefore, we need to hear from this meeting between the two leaders?
Well, what we want to hear at this time is not only a lot of talk, but also that they're really going to implement real measures as well. We have had, of course, lots of talks in the past. We have had lots of talks. Well, we're going to have lots of talks this week. We're going to probably have lots of talks also in the weeks to come. The most important thing is that everybody's going to be sitting on the same line, and they are really going to take action as well. And that is what the market has been waiting for, and that's what the market has been looking for as well. And that's something we haven't been seeing really yet. And that is something, of course, this week we will be looking at it again. So expectations are not going to be very, very high because a lot of people have been disappointed in the past, and we are, of course, a lot of other people will be saying, well, there's going to be a lot of talk again, but no real measures. And that is what the danger is for this week again.
Willem-Mark, really the only action we have seen so far has been from the ECB, but of course we know Merkel opposes a bigger role for the European Central Bank. Do you think Sarkozy will push through more bond buying or a more formal role for the central bank?
Well, it's like everything. It's going to be a trade-off. If say, Mr. Sarkozy is going to push for this, then Mrs. Merkel will ask for something in return as well. Both, of course, are facing elections. Both are, well, at this moment, they're going in the right direction to be re-elected, as it looks like, the latest polls. So there's definitely going to be some kind of trade-off. It's also for sure that the ECB, and that they have been saying that in the past as well, they are not there to clean up the mess put in by the politicians. They are there, effectively, to stabilize, but they're not there to clean up the mess.
And in terms of what Sarkozy is fighting for, of course, with France selling debt today, short-term debt, they sold longer-term debt last week, borrowing costs on the rise. What do you think the outlook is for the AAA rating of France?
Well, I think more or less what you can see in the markets, everybody's taking into account that France will lose the AAA rating, as will, as I say, most of Germany or most of Europe, including also Germany. The whole question is going to be now: is it going to be at the same time? Is Germany and France going to lose their AAA rating at the same time, or is it going to be a two-step where France is going to lose the AAA rating first and Germany after? And that is, of course, something they will be looking at, especially the politicians in France, but also in Germany. And, of course, to say the French politicians would prefer, in the case that it's going to happen, that it's going to be happening at the same time as Germany.
And, of course, Willem-Mark, a concern for the EFSF, the bailout fund, because it's really very dependent on the AAA ratings of the likes of France and Germany.
Yes, of course, but that's also the same point. You have to look at it as well. How much money is going to be poured into that, and how much money is going to come either from France or from Germany, and of course, at what kind of levels that money is going to go into this fund. And that is also effectively depending on the credit ratings the two countries have, and that is also a reflection of what we saw last week, of course, where the yields increased for not only for Germany but also for France.
So we're keeping a close eye on bond yields this week. Again, Willem-Mark Nabarro, head of European equities for Asia at Exane BNP Paribas. Thank you, and we'll be coming back to you in just a couple of minutes for a flavour of your top stock picks as well, what you like and what you dislike. And given all of this uncertainty over European debt crisis, what are the implications for economic growth in the region, do you think?
Well, of course, we don't expect that there's going to be massive economic growth, to be honest with you. We even think that there's going to be a slight recession in Europe. And that's also why we say it's probably a good idea to invest in European companies which have got a global outlook and a global scope instead of a pure European scope. In that case, you're going to be looking, of course, at the blue chips. You're going to be looking at, especially also in sectors where we can see some growth coming from the rest of the world, and especially also at companies where we see some sustained dividend growth as well. And those are the sectors and those are the companies you want to invest in.
So I see those sorts of industries that you're looking at in particular. I see you particularly like telecommunications. You outline companies such as Deutsche Telekom, Vodafone and the likes. What's the attraction for phone companies and telecoms in particular?
Effectively, if you look at companies like Deutsche Telekom and you look at companies like Vodafone, they have been growing their dividends over the last 5 years on a sustainable basis as well. The same thing you will find in oil and gas. That's something as well. It has been a very good performer in the sector overall in 2011, and that's also a sector where we continue to invest in, especially in Royal Dutch and Total, for example. Another one would be in pharmaceuticals, and there we're looking at Sanofi, which is for us one of the cheapest big pharmaceutical companies you can find. Very, very good dividend yield and sustainable dividend yield as well. And the same we will find in Roche, for example.
So
outsiders would be...
Sorry, do continue,
sorry, yes?
Willem-Mark.
Outsiders would be, for example, Philips. That's a company which will not come to mind, but Philips, if you look at it, they have been growing their dividends over the last 5 years the whole time.
So there really has been a focus for you, you say, on dividend yields, returns and companies that have exposure outside of Europe. I noticed there are no banks on your list. Is this because European banks are so exposed to the sovereign debt crisis at home and don't have enough reach outside of European?
Well, effectively, for the time being, we do not want to invest in the financial sector. We are not very, very keen to invest in the financial sector. If you need to invest in the financials, we would prefer to go to insurance companies over banks. A good one which would come to mind would Allianz or Allianz. And otherwise, if you need to invest in banks, because there are effectively some people have mandates to invest in banks, then we will be looking at SHB, for example, in Scandinavia. We will also be looking at, for example, at Lloyd's in London. We saw, of course, that the CEO just came back, which is good news. And those are a few of the names where we'll be looking at in the banking sector. Of course, you do not want to have too much exposure to banks which have got massive exposure to, say, the more difficult countries. And we also know, of course, that banks has got a tendency not to lend too much at this moment. And that is also, of course, why we say maybe it's not a good idea to start investing heavily in banks.
So keep away relatively from that industry group, but still focus on Lloyd's, and we'll be keeping a close eye on Lloyd's banking group today as the Chief Executive does return. Willem-Mark Nabarro, Head of European Equities for Asia at Exane BNP Paribas, thank you very much for your insights today.